centrally. Gary, could you move the microphone?
I'll move it. It's okay?
Not quite.
Thanks. You have to do more than that to get into trouble. Something much more interesting. All right, then. You good over there? Oh, thank you. Yes, thank you. Thank you. All right. Good evening, everyone. Hi. Thank you for coming. It's lovely to see long time no see 'em faces, and often see 'em faces, and new faces. We welcome you. We welcome you. We're very happy that you're here. And we're very happy to share what we can with you who wish to be connected with, perhaps start a connection with meditation or continue and deepen a connection with meditation. This is something that we are really dedicated to sharing with all of you as widely as possible, and to show that there are things that we can actually learn. Meditation is a word that actually encompasses a couple of skills are involved, which we will actually introduce tonight. The capacity to just sit down and not do anything, quote, not do anything, is actually quite a challenge in our culture. We've had many conversations with ourselves and with each other about, you know, there's a kind of gravitational force that objects and to-do lists and computers have for us. And so there is a skill actually involved, and the need to have a real intention to pull away from that for a time in order to cultivate something within, in order to cultivate some part of you actually that is incredibly valuable, incredibly significant in your life, and in many respects is something that you already have, but you haven't paid attention to. So there's the skill of recognizing the value of sitting. That's already something. And you all have some recognition of that, no doubt, and that has brought you here. But it's a skill. I want to name it. It's a skill. It's an insight. It's not something that everyone is ready to see the value of. And there's also the skill of gently focusing attention, the skill of not getting too judgmental about what you notice when you finally sit down with yourself and see what's going on inside. It can be rampaging storms of all kinds of things. So not getting lost in judgment is actually a very important skill, and it doesn't come overnight. So it's one of the things that we cultivate over time. Meditation is really a process of cultivation. It's like learning a musical instrument, learning an art, learning to dance, learning to draw, learning to speak in front of other people. It's something we can definitely learn, and it doesn't happen overnight. So if you don't feel utterly transformed in your first session of meditation, it doesn't mean that you won't feel that in time. It's a very rich human experience, really. And so we're going to do some guided meditation tonight. And this is what we also do on Sundays. Some of you have been here on Sundays at 11. We like to offer the community an opportunity to just come together and do some meditation, because as several of you mentioned to me as I was going around saying hello, you've done some meditation at home, but there's a sense that something's missing. And indeed, we do find that we benefit a lot from coming together as a cohort, as a group, and doing some meditation together. So Dawn Mountain is very much dedicated to supporting you in your journey in meditation, and there are different ways that you might want to take that journey. You might want to take it in with a very Buddhist kind of education involved, and we offer that. Or you may simply want to be learning some skills life skills, and we also offer that. So whatever your intention is, we like to support you. We'll say more about that a little bit later. You notice that we bowed down at the very beginning. This is very customary in Asian traditions and Buddhism. It's a way of honoring what we are all here to do, and a way of just kind of marking the beginning of a bit of a different kind of psychological space. So we'd like to do that. Okay, do you want to say anything?
Should we do the book? We'll do the book after the meditation. Should we introduce it now or introduce it?
I think we can introduce it
After the
later.
meditation.
Yeah, but do you want to say anything?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. In life in general, and also in meditation, you can say that we have three functioning elements, three gateways to life experience, and that is the body, our speech, and speech doesn't mean just the words that we say, but in these traditions it also means something like energy or movement. Because when we speak, it actually requires a certain kind of breath, energy, movement is occurring. So we have speech, we have energy, can understand that in a very broad, common sense kind of way. And we, of course, have mind. And part of what we seek to do in a session of meditation is to bring these three into kind of alignment, into harmony. Sometimes we feel very at odds with ourselves. The body wants to do one thing, the mind wants to do another thing, and we don't have energy to do either of those things. So we have elements of speech, a little bit of song that we're going to start with. All of this is a way to settle down, to just draw a little bit of a boundary very gently around this space that we are taking for ourselves. And with our mind, the very first thing that we do is consider our intention. So whatever your own personal intention might be, honor it, whatever it is. Maybe you have some stress that you would like to feel a little less of. Maybe you feel that the vistas of your life in some way, the horizon of your life could open in a way that it hasn't yet, to inspiration or love or just a more holistic way of being in the world. Whatever your intention is, we also take a moment to kind of open our minds and our intentions, that whatever we wish for ourselves, something positive that we wish for ourselves, we also open to a wish that other beings, all other beings, will have access to what will bring them happiness. It's very simple. And yet, how often do we think and wish that all beings everywhere have happiness? Sometimes we do. So I want to start with this. This is the aspiration here. It's in the middle of your yellow sheet. May all beings always have. And then we'll go into a guided meditation. May all beings always have happiness and its causes. May all beings always be free of pain and its causes. Bring your mind into your body. And for a moment, feel the power of the alignment in your body as you allow yourself to do what the body really wants to do, which is to sit quite erectly, whether on a chair or on your cushion, quite straight, not stiff, but straight, in a kind of open way, like a young plant reaching toward the sun. And when you sit this way, there comes to be a natural alignment that really extends from the center of the earth, which, consider for a moment, is actually directly beneath you right now. The center of this great planet is directly beneath you. And it is actually sending forth a supporting, healing energy. And it is actually part of the supporting ground on which we sit. And being directly beneath you, this center point of the earth is in direct alignment with the bottom of your spine. Just take a moment to feel that alignment, to feel the support that's actually coming to you at this time, a support for whatever your intention is in this moment. And the bottom of your spine is also aligned with the center of your abdomen, a very powerful place in the body. And all of this is in direct alignment with your heart, so that your heart, in an energetic sense, in an emotional, psychological sense, is actually supported by this alignment which comes from the center of the earth, through the center of your abdomen, and the center of your heart. And this alignment continues through your throat, which we just used for singing, and to the top of your crown, which is actually in alignment too with the apex of space. And just sense into your body. Perhaps you can sense that alignment. Or you can simply sense the contact that you have with your cushion or your chair. You're really being supported there. And the reason for mentioning this support is to notice it with your body. You can actually rely on this ground to hold you. When the body feels supported, it's easy for the mind and psyche to feel supported as well. So let yourself feel supported. Feel the contact between the bottom of your body, your legs, your feet with the floor. Just feel into that. Notice your own sensation. So already you're settling into this support. And you're breathing naturally. Gently direct your attention to the sensation of your breath. Your breath moves in and it moves out, and you can feel that. And let all other concerns simply ride away with your next exhalation, expelled into distant space. And your attention continues unperturbed, resting gently on your breath. And you inhale, taking in refreshment, and just feel the experience. No longer taken for granted. Feel the experience of your inhalation. Your chest opens. Maybe your heart begins to open. Your belly expands. And then just when that breath seems to have done what it can do, you're ready to relax into an exhalation. And you do this at your own natural pace. You're not trying to change anything. You just want to be with your own experience of your breath. So we'll sit together, minding our breath for a minute or two. There's a certain gentle pleasure in refreshment coming in when you need it. If you've ever tried holding your breath, you know how you long for a breath after only a moment or two. So the pleasure of that incoming breath bringing you just what you need. If you've ever tried to hold your breath, you know that it's a great pleasure in releasing it when you're ready. And we do that also. Keep bringing your attention gently back to your breath. Of course, the mind is ravenous for things to enjoy, and the mind will trot off to the past, the future, objects in the room. It's natural. Whenever you notice that your mind has done that, you very gently, very sweetly, very kindly bring your mind back. And invite yourself to the pleasure of just being in the present moment, just observing your breath. Life can be that simple sometimes. And bring your mind back as many times as needed. There's always a moment for beginning again, fresh. You may slowly start to notice more and more about the sensations associated with the in-breath and the out-breath. And your eyes can just be slightly open, set about 1.5 feet in front of you, but you're not really engaging what's appearing to your eyes. Your attention is on your breath. On your breath and the sensations in your body. And then memories or plans start knocking on your mind's door, and you let them go. Just bring your mind back to your breath. It's good to do this in very short sessions if you're new. And sometimes you can use sound to help gather your mind together. We use the sound hung. Hung is a gathering sound. And especially when a group of us is together, create a sound that helps to settle us. So on the exhale, you sound hong, hong at your own pace. We'll do this together till I sound the bell, and then we'll go back to silent observation of our breath. It's another way to integrate your body, energy, and mind. still have your supportive alignment. Sometimes if your mind is racing, it can be helpful to remember again for a moment how you are supported from the very center of the earth, directly beneath you. Even sometimes sending down a shaft of light or tree trunk of wood, extending down from the bottom of your spine and easily moving through the layers of earth just beneath you, down 50 and 500 feet, 5,000 feet, and resting at the center of the earth. You may find that that helps you settle and trust the support that is present for you, actual physical support, and rest in it as your attention stays with your breath. Actually, your breath is encountering your entire body, refreshing and impacting your entire body. So by paying attention to your breath, you are actually making a connection with every part of your being, physical, emotional, energetic, and mental. And using sound is another way to integrate body, speech, energy, and mind. When we sound hung, your attention, your mind is completely wedded to the sound of hung. And you can also feel the sound expanding from your chest, going out into the room. So you're integrated. We'll do that again once more. Ah just rest in whatever space you're in. So attention is everything. Mind, consciousness, attention is part of every single thing that you do in life. So when we take some time out during the day to pay attention to attention as a function in and of itself, we develop a capacity for attending to others, attending to ourselves. These turn out to be very, very deeply interrelated. If you can't pay attention to yourself, it will not be so easy to pay attention to someone else. It just works that way. Or won't be easy to pay attention to someone else in a balanced way, in a way where you are still really present in yourself and not somehow being evacuated of any kind of self-care and self-presence. That's not what we mean by attending to another. The cultivation of attention is closely linked to another very central cultivation, which we often explore here, and that is the cultivation of love. The cultivation of love for your own being. And once you love your own being, it kind of arises that you understand that everyone else has a beingness that they love. And it becomes easier and easier to love that other being that is actually, in an important sense, a mirror of your own being. So the cultivation of attention is very significant for life. It is a form of itself, a form of love, of caring. How do you feel when somebody pays attention to you? How did you feel as a child when mom or dad or big sister or little brother either did or did not pay attention to you in a way that felt good? All attention doesn't feel good, right? But this kind of attention that we're cultivating is a very clean kind of attention. Not trying to suck something out of somebody else. Maybe you've experienced that kind of attention. You're also not trying to make somebody else into some particular thing that will please you, which is another thing that we human beings do. It's just attending. Really not trying to make anything in particular happen, but paying attention to what does happen. Something is always happening. Have you noticed that? Something is always happening, internally or externally. And so there's a way in which we sometimes feel it's our job to make things happen in a certain particular way. To be in control. We even use the term control freak. We recognize how powerful a drive that is. But paying attention isn't that. And it may take time to separate this controlling impulse that we pretty much all have, unless we're so depressed that we feel it's hopeless to try to control anything. And then that's another healing that needs to occur, because both of those are really two sides of the same error, you might say, or the same imbalance in attention. Attention is just there. But we do find sometimes when we start paying attention that we notice more clearly than ever before what is wrong. What is wrong with us. And once that starts becoming clear, we are very, very clear about what is wrong with all these people around us who are not paying attention. And there's a lovely phrase called the stink of Zen, but it's not unique to Zen, right? Those of us who have been around the communities of cultivation for some time, it happens. You get, kind of righteous in your phobic desire for proper attention. So that's too tight. That all of this, Buddhists, they kind of sum up all these things of attention being either too tight, that would be too controlling, too stringent, too judgmental, too running after this and that thing to pay attention to. It's a kind of tightness. Or, I don't care. That's not attention. I can't. I won't. Doesn't matter. Whatever. That's too loose. So, very much like learning to ride a bicycle, actually. We, over time, doesn't happen in one session, even in 1 week. It might take you some time, right? But it happens quite naturally if you just sit yourself down on a daily basis for 10, 15 minutes as you're able. You can even set your timer for 3-minute, 4-minute little periods to do one after the other. You can be very gentle with yourself. It will come. You will find a balance. And that balance can go deeper and deeper and deeper, and that is why we see it as a lifetime cultivation. But you can cultivate a lot of skill in a few weeks also. If you just do it, attend to it. The human organism likes to be in balance, actually. If you give yourself the space to just sit there and be with yourself, and don't be beguiled by all the protests that will rise up for sure from your throat and your chest and your neighbors, the telephone, calling you, do this, do that. You have to say, no, for this time, I have a boundary around all of that, and I'm just going to sit here in my circle of meditation. And make yourself a schedule, a realistic schedule, and you will find more and more of this balance. Can I? Okay.
One of the things we do here, I just wanted to introduce before I said some things, is we collect the names of people who are ill that we know or in despair or recently departed or ourselves. At the end, we dedicate the merit of having met together to all of those who will be in the book. So we'll pass this around. Terry, maybe you could start passing it. So if you have somebody who you would like us to mention their names, please put their name in or yourself. And it's just a way of having the collective benefit and positivity of all of us here being oriented towards everybody who needs assistance. So in preparation for the evening, I did my requisite web searches and wrote out my notes, and then I just started playing around in my mind with what did I want to say. It sort of came out something like this. It's a kind of ironic. I went to a engineering high school in Brooklyn, and my first course there that I remember was called Industrial Processes, and the first thing that we learned about in industrial processes, fondly called IP, was about distillation columns in oil distilleries. And I didn't know what they were talking about, and we had to learn how to draw oil distillation columns, and we had to learn about the whole process of this. And so I think it's somewhat funny that I've ended up in the capital of that kind of world. And I was quite scientific. I did my 4 years of engineering high school and was quite a whiz in science. Went on to college, and I was a big chemistry major. And it was my junior year, and I had done the very smallest. I was, again, thinking about what do I need to share, and I thought a little bit of what drew me to this whole, to be here in the middle of all of this. Where did this all start? There were some very small beginnings that I'd made. I read The Prophet by Khalil Gibran, a wonderful book. I'd read the Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda, another wonderful book. I joined the Self-Realization Fellowship, which was his organization at the time. I got a book on yoga and started to do some practices and ended up in the hospital, which I don't think is that unusual for people starting to get very intense about any kind of anything. And then there were some discussion in those days about LSD, and I read in the scholarly journal called Playboy an article by Aldous Huxley about LSD, which was kind of interesting. And I knew the name Aldous Huxley somehow. And then this guy named Richard Alpert, who was doing research at Harvard, was destined to come to Brooklyn College to give a talk on, I think it was titled Oriental Mysticism, Cognitive Psychology, and LSD. And I'd watched something on TV about LSD. My sister had heard something in her psychology classes about it. It just seemed sort of strange and interesting. And I was a curious chap, still am. So I was at that point, I have to say, already quite aware of how neurotic I was, and found my mind actually quite problematic to be with, and actually, quite obsessive and quite torturous. It was really kind of torturous to be in my own skin. And I was interested vaguely, I don't know, I had some idea maybe something that this lecture would be about might address some of that torture that I was experiencing with my obsessiveness. So I went, and Richard Alpert talked about his research on LSD. He talked about how geese, will imprint on humans, and so if a goose sees a human as a parent, they'll follow the human rather than a goose. I mean, there's a great movie. Has everybody seen Fly Away Home? Have most of you seen Fly Away Home? Some of you seen? Who saw Fly Away Home? So few of you. Well, if you have the chance, it's a terrific movie, and whatever his name is, Daniels is in it, and what's her name, who's become a big star in that bloody vampire movie now, series. But it's about geese and imprinting, and it's really the case that, if you get little geese and you get them young enough, they'll follow humans as their parents. The point was, we all get imprinted with certain patterns that become kind of bondage patterns, and that Richard Alpert at the time talked about Oriental mysticism as a way of becoming free of this kind of habitual patterning that we get stuck in. That's a kind of prison, which seemed to address my obsessiveness. And he also talked about, and was able to somehow transmit some feeling of something about universal love, and that his experiences with, I think by that point he had already seen Neem Karoli Baba in India, some sense of his experiences of love with maybe Neem Karoli Baba, and also with LSD. I can't remember if he'd seen him by that point or not, but he definitely had some sense that LSD and or meditation would open up some kind of universal love. And I, in my scientific way, had a spiritual awakening during that talk. I was numb. I had pins and needles going through my arms and my legs. I was shocked. Here was somebody who was talking about something that I didn't really know that anybody talked about, but I really deeply wanted to know about. Deeply, deeply wanted to know about everything he was talking about. And it was sort of shocking that, there really were people out there, and a lot of them, historically, thinking about these things that really meant something to me, but I had never really been able to articulate or knew that anybody else was thinking about. And so in some ways, I think that there was, from the start, a kind of two-sided kind of interest that I had in all of this. And one was just to feel better. Get me out of my hell that is called my mind. And the other was something larger, something deeper, something more mysterious, something that could make me feel pins and needles and like, my life had been turned upside down in terms of universal love. What could that be like? And so intriguing and so drew me so much. So I think that, when people come here to Dawn Mountain, it's sort of probably usually some mix of those two, and maybe one is like almost total, or maybe it's 50-50. We never know. Most of us are looking to feel better. I always want to feel better, and if I can find something that helps me feel better, I love it. But the more I studied Buddhism and Hinduism and really other religious traditions eventually, the more this whole other big picture emerged as of great concern and of great interest. And so, what we're about here and what meditation can address is, it's quite a span. And, if you look at books and what's available nowadays, it's quite interesting. Because really there's a lot. And we try to address all of it here. There's a kind of bottom line physiological benefit to meditation. Most basic meditations, paying attention to the breath, will lower your metabolic heart rate. It'll reduce your load of work that your heart has. You'll have perhaps some improved blood pressure, but if your blood pressure is really high, take your medication. We're not going to have miracles here that we're going to cure everything with meditation. It can be an adjunct to what other people, other things we're doing. It might improve immune function, but again, if you have severely compromised immune situations or autoimmune diseases, it's not that we're going to, turn that around and make you, give you a miracle cure. It's something that can contribute to wellness. And then there are emotional benefits, again, not to be replaced or alternatives to psychotherapy if that's required. There's increased brainwave coherence, which people think is a good thing. We can know ourselves more fully emotionally, and that includes the good, the bad, and the ugly. Like it or not, when we meditate, we become friends with all the parts of ourselves. And that may include things that you may not have wanted to think about or pains that you've shoved out of your mind. But they do come up, and hopefully with some practice and discussion with teachers, you develop some capacity for befriending all of what occurs in your experience of meditation. And so part of the whole process that we think is so important is, it's actually, and Anne alluded to this, a process of self-acceptance. And it's a kind of interesting phrase, self-acceptance, because one could actually say that the whole process of meditation is a process of self-acceptance. You know, when you start getting into the game of meditation, in a way, you first think that you're some sort of doer and you're calming yourself down, and there's something to that. But one of the things that we learn, if we really allot something like, whether it be 10 minutes or 20 minutes or 30 minutes to a process of meditation, is that we do our part, which means we're there, we've got to put our mind on the breath, and we've rested there, or we're doing the chanting. But over time, and that's not 1 week or 1 month, but over time, we start noticing that things are changing. And initially we might think, well, it's because I've been doing my meditation for 20 to 30 minutes a day. But slowly we may begin to realize that we're tapping into something that feels deeper or more natural or more like a kind of inner heritage that is ours in a kind of universal way. And so, you know, when I was 19 and I went to hear Richard Alpert, you know, in some ways, one way of telling that story was I was longing for relief, and I needed relief, and he was going to bring it. And then I took up this practice of meditation. There's another way of looking at this which might be as useful, and that is we have a kind of natural depth. And despite all of the distractions that we are currently exposed to, and boy, are we exposed to them today, we still have some kind of intrinsic longing for something deeper and natural. And one could even say, and this is a way that some people would talk, and some, specifically in like Jodo Shinshu, Japanese Buddhism, it's kind of implicit in Tibetan Buddhism. It's not, you know, it's probably there somewhere, but it's kind of implicit if you understand this perspective. I may have gone to find something in listening to Richard Alpert, but something also may have come to find me. And there's a lot of usefulness in beginning to understand that kind of perspective, because we sort of do our half of creating a kind of context when we set aside a period for, let's say, resting in our breath, or chanting, coming to Dawn Mountain regularly. But there is something that's whether you want to say meeting us or calling us, that is deeper, more mysterious, and of a kind of spiritual nature. It's something that occurs in a spiritual relationship with the deepest part of ourselves. It occurs with our teachers in the relationship with our teachers. So all of our Tibetan teachers, without exception, have said, you know, you wouldn't be studying with me if you hadn't done this innumerable times in the past and if you hadn't prayed your head off to again have contact with the tradition. You wouldn't even hear the words we were saying. You wouldn't even hear the titles of the lectures we were giving if in prior lives you hadn't studied this already, practiced it already, and made deep, deep prayer petitions to make recontact with this tradition. And we do. I mean, every day we have prayers we say to, you know, may we from lifetime to lifetime be reconnected with our teachers and our lamas and come in contact with this depth that I think, you know, anybody who walks into these particular portals at some level, maybe if it's just 3% of who you are, but it might be 90% of who you are, feel some kind of deep draw to something mysterious that we might not understand, something we might not even know that we had a draw to. I mean, living in Brooklyn, do you think I had a clue about, these beings, and some of them have so many arms and legs? I had no idea about any of this stuff. And if you had described it, I probably would have said, you're a rocker. And if you had talked to me living in the heart of what's now the heart of Hasidic Judaism in Brooklyn and said, one day you're going to be sitting in Houston, Texas, talking about Buddhism. Talk about miracles. So, it didn't make much sense prospectively. I didn't really know what I was doing when I gave up my prosperous chemistry major and started going to all of these meetings in New York about with Gurdjieff's secretary and yoga classes. I don't think there was anything Buddhistic going on in New York at the time. I don't remember going to anything. I definitely went to some Hindu stuff, and I definitely went to Gurdjieff's secretary's classes. But there was something pulling me. I applied to graduate school. I met our root teacher in a tea stand in India. Then I had enormous difficulty with him, and I rejected the teachings. I ran away, only 2 years later to find myself living with the same exact teacher in the same house, teaching him English. What was that about? The teachings were coming to get me, even if I was kicking and screaming, and I didn't want to believe in the teachings. I didn't even want to practice Tibetan Buddhism at that point. We were living in the same house. I was a diehard Theravada Buddhist. He was teaching this foreign thing, strange teachings. Teachings came and got me. I think about us, and I include me in this. We all are sort of wanting something, and we in some ways don't know what we want. And I've said this analogy, it's this wonderful image that the Tibetans have of the bear is in front of the chipmunk nest in the tree, and he's pulling out, or she's pulling out chipmunks and putting them under their armpit because they want to collect all these chipmunks to eat them. Pulls out one, puts it under their armpit, and then pulls out another, lifts up the armpit, puts the other one in there as if the first one would stay, and then, takes another claw and grabs another one, picks up their armpit. Well, of course, the first two have gone away by now. Gets a third one. And it's sort of like my life and everyone around me. You know, we all want a kind of satisfaction. We all want a kind of meaning. So maybe I'll get it in my iPad, or maybe in my Mac Air, or maybe in my iPhone, or now I see they got a Samsung Galaxy watch that I'm going to be able to put with my Galaxy, G4 phone, and it's going to be able to tell my heartbeat, and maybe that will give me ultimate satisfaction finally. Or maybe Facebook, or maybe Twitter, or Instagram, and then the things that I don't know about because I'm not young enough. Maybe that will do it, or maybe that book I'll buy, or maybe that piece of music. Maybe that will give me that ultimate satisfaction. And we do know a taste of what it is. But there are many who would say that all of those tastes are little tippies of icebergs of what it is that is our innermost nature. And we sort of know that we've got something like that. And we wish to taste it, experience it, and swim in it. And we have some intuition that our teachers, the tradition, the teaching seem to offer some opening to ever greater exposure to some of that within ourselves. And so we're attracted to that. It's a little bit mysterious because certainly we have some very, very simple meditations, and they offer some very, very definite benefits and some ease of life and ease of our emotional well-being. And then for people who are interested, we have these more advanced Tibetan teachings, and they're a little bit more mysterious. Some of the things that we are asked to do certainly don't leap to mind initially for most Westerners. There's talk about obstructions, there's talk about karma, there's talk about veils that obstruct our true nature. So it's a kind of meal that takes some getting used to. I always like to tell the story of going down to the Lower East Side. You know, I grew up, I never ate pizza or Chinese food, and it wasn't until college that I really, high school I got into pizza, and it was college for Chinese food. Very, very limited background. But then I got turned on to Chinatown, so I'd go down there, and you can get a meal for $1 or 80 cents in those days. But I'd noticed that I'd be eating whatever, and then the Oriental people would be ordering stuff that, I couldn't make sense of what they were eating. It didn't seem to be on any menu that I was seeing. So I would ask the waitress, what is that? And, so it's, pickled sea cucumber or something, or curried sea cucumber in this really bright orange sauce. I said, well, why isn't it on the English menu? He said, well, you people don't like it. And, it's a kind of great metaphor in a way for the challenges that we as Westerners do encounter in moving into another culture's spiritual tradition. It takes a bit of a getting used to if you want to get into pickled sea cucumber. Not everybody's going to want to do that. Some people like lo mein, which is, or chow mein, which is an American creation of Chinese food. It's okay. It's good. But maybe some people decide, I want to go for the gusto and I really want that, curried sea cucumber stuff with the bright orange sauce, and they learn to enjoy it and they realize it's terrific. In some ways, it's not that big a leap, but for some people getting involved with Tibetan Buddhist practice involves a lot of culture, language. It's some people are drawn to it and some people find it a bit of a challenge. We appreciate it. And one of the things that Ann and I do are we serve as digestive enzymes for foreign foods and really make what might seem hard to digest or taste or appreciate, we try to make it make sense and allow people to be able to actually get nurturance from what might seem pretty darn foreign initially. You know, so we find ourselves in Houston, Texas, teaching about something. You couldn't go as far around the globe. Actually, you know, Tibet is pretty much exactly halfway around. So if you wanted to go as far away as you could go on this planet, you would go to Tibet. You can't go any further away from Houston, Texas. In time, in space, in altitude, in language, and it's a pretty different outlook. But there is something universal about their message, something powerful about their teachings, and an ability to bring us in touch with something that's universally accessible. So the means might take a little bit of getting used to, but certainly Ann and I have traversed a lot of those, not all by any means, but a lot. And one of the reasons we're sitting up here is because we do think that there is so much to offer in terms of the whole path of Tibetan Buddhist practice on meditation. So, you know, on Tuesday nights we try to offer, we could say that's a middle ground of material that is, in a way, pan-Buddhist, that overlaps with helping people in daily life, but with a kind of a twist of Buddhist ideas thrown in so that we can understand something from that culture and how to really live both more effectively and more spiritually in ours. And then we offer retreats from time to time on, nowadays we call it the secret mantra tradition, which is really a more of a entree into the heart of Tibetan Buddhist practice. And when people hang around here long enough and they start hearing what other people are doing, or they realize they would be interested in a higher level of commitment, they can talk to us and find out how to get involved with that. You know, and there's a time and a place for that. And one of the things that typically happened in Tibetan Buddhist practice is that it typically was never given really, really easily. And so, you know, our teacher, Keitson Sangbo, had a very, very special lineage of dark retreat. And I only heard some of this tale after he passed, but he literally had to stand and just stand waiting for 3 days outside of his teacher's home to request these teachings. And of course, each time he'd knock on the door, the teacher would say no. I mean, this was just classic in that tradition. I mean, it was really user unfriendly. We are not that user unfriendly, but we want, you know, if people really want to get into Tibetan Buddhist practice, it would be good for people to have some skills with attention, to learn how to practice attention, to have some ability to practice in an ongoing way for a few months, if not a year. And then if they read some books on Tibetan Buddhist practice and hear what we're doing, you know, people can talk with us, and there's a way of getting up to speed on that. So that's a little bit of our program. I think what we're going to do is, I think we're going to take a pause, and I'll just give you the logistics. We'll have a little break. I don't know if there's any nosh set out or not, but we should have some little snacks. We'll bring them out if they're not out already. Some people who need to do some meeting will go upstairs and have their meeting, and I will be here. We'll take a 10-minute break, and I'll return, and we'll do some question and answer, and then I'll lead a concluding meditation, and we'll read the names.
Okay.
Do you have anything in closing?
So you may feel, well, that sounds, the orange sauce and the sea cucumber, I don't know so much about that. That's okay. We don't serve it unless, you know, there's a demand. Um, but the watching your breath, our advice really is that as for those of you who are really beginning to consider having a meditative portion to your life, say the first goal is to establish a regular practice so that you really do it every day. Not whether you feel like it, that's not the question, whether you feel like it or not. You know, you brush your teeth pretty regularly, I imagine, whether you feel like it or not, because you understand it's just part of what you do as part of your human cultivation of cleanliness. So this is what we did tonight actually can be extremely illuminating if you set aside some time, even if it's just 10 minutes, and even if you break that 10-minute period into maybe 12 minutes, 4-minute periods, just so you do something that you can actually do and actually succeed at, and you will see something. You will see something. Have a regular practice. So you already know that you can alternate between your attention on your breath and using sound. How was that for you when you used a little? How did that? You always like it. Why do you like it? Did you like to make noise?
It is a way sort of clearing all other thoughts or feelings away, focusing just on the sound. I always like really doing in a group setting because there's a support that comes from hearing other people doing that
Yes, there is.
with a similar goal of trying to get to a point in their lives that I think maybe there's a lot of that shared kind of ideal that we're trying to get to. So it feels comforting and supportive to do that in a group setting and to have that sort of similar goal. So I always enjoy that.
Okay. So you can feel that it's a little bit of a different channel, right? When you're sounding, and there's all kinds of studies about how sound, the portion of the brain that it uses, how it impacts the human organism and so on. So you can do that. You've learned tonight something that you can do and that you can cultivate, and it will definitely be helpful. And then if you would like to build on that, of course, we're here to support you in doing that. Should we mention these things now or later?
I can mention
So maybe just since it, for those of you who would like to explore more about mindfulness, our very own Claire is teaching mindfulness for everyone on Saturdays, September 14th, October 12th, and November 16th. If you've left your name with us, and we hope you have, you'll get a reminder about that. So that would be a very good way to continue what we started tonight. And she's very popular. She's done this for quite a while now. And we are also beginning our Teaching Tuesdays, which is the first and third Tuesday every month, the third on September 17th. And what we're talking about is more really of what Harvey was introducing so eloquently tonight, this sense that we actually all have some actually universal richness and expansiveness of being that's actually our birthright. And how do we come to actually touch into that? The Buddhists call this Buddha nature. There are many, many words for it, actually, across the world's traditions. And we're going to talk about this in the context of developing qualities such as generosity, kindness. These are staple spiritual qualities. Every tradition admires them. And we want to offer them to the community as a way of enriching our way of relating with ourselves and the world. These are ethical dimensions, they are relational dimensions of spiritual life, and they are expressions of something that is innately available to us. So that's Teaching Tuesdays. If you have children, We have a wonderful mindfulness for children program starting. Simone is leading it back here. I'm sure she'll be happy to talk with you about it. And we have a flyer for that. There's going to be a 5-week program. It has been, mindfulness for children there's been a lot of research on this also. It's extremely helpful. If you have a 5 or 12-year-old in your family or neighborhood, let us know.
Just on that, Richie Davidson, who's a neurologist neuroscientist up at University of Wisconsin, has been doing a lot of research on these kinds of programs. They're finding that this kind of mindfulness for children, at this age group in particular, assists with what's called impulse control. And there was this massive, very interesting study in Australia on impulse control over the lifespan. And they were looking at finances, marital stability, health, and all of the indicators are correlated with higher impulse control, is greater financial well-being, lower criminal statistics, greater family stability, better health. I mean, it's like if there was one thing you could offer a child, it would be some greater level of impulse control. It's just like it's money in the bank. So we really, really encourage parents, or if you know some parents, to share this program with them, because it's such a gift to a child.
And it's not a Buddhist-oriented program. It's a secular program.
Yeah.
Because we want to share this skill as widely as possible.
Open to everyone.
Open to everyone.
Okay, we will take a 10-minute break.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Okay, maybe we could come down and join you. You think? Okay.
For people, if you have any questions about meditation or anything else related to Dawn Mountain or your being here, I'd be happy to try to answer. Yes.
Hello. Yeah. The first evening I came to Dawn Mountain, I purchased this book, Essence of the Heart Sutra.
Yes.
And it's an excellent book. Highly recommend it. But in here, His Holiness talks about how Buddhism is a non-theistic tradition, and that they reject the notion of an eternal, unchanging, unitary absolute. And I mean, I kind of baffle me a little bit, but you know, this is the problem. The question I have. I was reading another book, and there's a famous nun, Tibetan nun, Mashik Labdron, who lived from 1031 to 1129, and she's the creator of the Shad ritual, and she, in this book she says, demons arise when your mind is agitated. Mental poisons come from the perception of a self. All demons are cut through in your mind. Mind is liberated in the unborn expanse. My question is, if the Buddhists reject the notion of an eternal, unchanging, unitary absolute, to what is she referring with the great unborn expanse? She's not the only person, the only Tibetan Buddhist I've read who refers to the great unborn expanse. What is the great unborn expanse?
Yeah, so the question is a good one. Maybe I will try to simplify it a little bit and maybe even distort it, but I think what His Holiness is certainly addressing is that in Buddhism not being theistic, there's no creator absolute held to in Buddhism. There's no absolute creator, a first cause. That's definitely the case in Buddhism. It is also the case that Buddhism talks about great expanse and space and all of that, but none of that has any substantiality or anything you could put your hands on whatsoever. So actually people will talk about an ultimate truth, but it's not something that's substantial or a first cause. because actually, if you really look into it, Buddhism would say, actually, when you really look at causation, on a conventional level it exists, but in an ultimate level you can't find causation either. But that's sort of a confusing way of talking. But it's just to say that it is the case, on the one hand, yes, Buddhism doesn't hold to an absolute. So there's no thing like a theistic deity creating the world. That's important to get straight. Buddhism doesn't accept that. What the expanse is a little bit more mysterious, if truth be told. But it's not anything like a theistic deity. Could somebody turn this thing on, Gary? It's nothing like a theistic deity.
Can I ask you
A follow-up,
does the great unborn expanse subsume all of conventional reality?
In a shorthand way, yes. But it doesn't mean that the way it arises or is related is anything that our ordinary minds could conceive of.
I guess that's the difficulty. But
Could you hold the mic this way? Yeah, ice cream cone, but I don't know if it's on even. It's on?
It is on. Hello?
Okay.
Okay. Well, I guess that's a problem. It seems like if you follow the path of logic, it either leads to a paradox or else an infinite regress. But it's I understand what.
I think one of the things I would say is that it's a little bit inevitable for us to get into these conversations, especially since in the West there's so much freight put on the first cause conversation. In Buddhism, there's a lot less freight put on a first cause conversation. There's a lot more freight put on, is your life satisfactory or unsatisfactory? If there's something unsatisfactory in your immediate experience, do you wish to become liberated from it or not? If you wish to become liberated from it, then we have a means for doing that liberation. So while there are these, I'd be lying if I were to say there aren't these larger theoretical conversations. There are plenty of them, many, many of them. But the main thrust of Buddhist practice is to understand the repetitive patterns that create suffering in our experience and the ways of behaving and understanding reality so that we can become free of those patterns. All of the theoretical superstructure, when it comes to that kind of practical conversation, most teachers would say, you can get into it, but it's not going to really address the issue of your suffering or your freedom or your clarity of mind or your deep satisfaction. That's how that's sort of dealt with. But there's no shortage of theory in Buddhism, for sure.
Okay, so that I kind of got the impression that this whole, the essence of the Heart Sutra, the perfection of wisdom is a results-driven philosophy with the desired result being cessation. So it's really
Cessation of suffering.
Cessation of suffering, of ignorance. So
Right, but there's even...
you really have to take it in context.
Right, and I haven't read that specific book, but understanding the Heart Sutra is not something that typically just comes by reading a book. It takes a lot of reflection and a lot of meditation and a lot of careful reflection. And that's probably something of which we will touch on in the series that we teach in the fall to some extent. But there are a lot of both contemplative and analytic meditations that relate to the Heart Sutra. but they need to be engaged in. It doesn't make easy sense to anyone. So if you didn't find that it just goes down like a Cheerio, that wouldn't be surprising to me. It's a hard text.
Yeah, I didn't really, I didn't have a problem with it. I have an intellectual understanding of emptiness.
Good.
It's, or I believe I do.
Good.
And, but yeah, I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Yeah, good. Okay, we've got some more questions. Yes.
How would you describe the difference between Theravada Buddhism and Mahayana or Tibetan Buddhism, and what drew you to Tibetan Buddhism?
That's a great question. Do you have about 3 years? Gesundheit. I want to sort of break it down to the most essential distinction. I think what's most useful to articulate would be that in Theravada Buddhism, the idea is that life is suffering, it's a cycle, and that one can put an end to that cycle in a state which is called nirvana or nibbana, and that is a state of diffuse peace. It just is peace. The process of rebirth has quieted all of what makes up one's personality has come to rest, and one is at peace, and one's individual spiritual goal is to arrive at that peace. Mahayana Buddhism would say that that particular goal of peace is not the ultimate goal, that the ultimate goal is of becoming a Buddha, and that a Buddha can, upon Buddhifying, can continue to manifest indefinitely for the needs of all sentient beings. And so there are two pieces to the Mahayana picture that I find more gratifying or more spiritually enriching to me. One is that it's not just looking for this kind of escape from a cycle of suffering, but rather it's seeing that all beings are interrelated, and that whatever spiritual advancement I personally make, it needs to be integrated into some relationship with others, and in fact a deep responsibility to liberate all other beings, and that the nature of the understanding that can be gotten through Mahayana practice allows one to have that skill, and that understanding, the level of wisdom that Mahayana talks about, they claim is deeper than the wisdom that Theravada talks about. And that's sort of a big philosophical issue. But the important thing is that the goal in terms of the type of wisdom that one seeks is different, and the responsibility with respect to other sentient beings is hugely different. And the Mahayana vision is much more appealing to me. What's then the unique feature about Tibetan Buddhism? Tibetan Buddhism is a tantric form of Buddhism, and Tantra is opposed to, as it were, Sutra. If you look at the sutras, the practice of becoming a Buddha takes innumerable lifetimes, really, 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 really long time. The tantric text and the tantric practices ultimately say that, especially in what we practice, Dzogchen, that if you do the right kinds of practices with the right kind of instruction, within one lifetime, one can achieve Buddhahood and then take on the acts of manifesting for sentient beings in order to help them as is needed. So Tibetan Buddhism takes the Mahayana vision and in a sense turbocharges it in terms of how fast and how powerfully one can achieve it. But it's a Mahayana form of practice. It's an excellent question. Another question?
I had a question. On. Okay.
Can you put that close to your mouth, please?
Yes. So, is this a Tibetan Buddhist temple?
This is a Tibetan Buddhist temple, but we teach everything from simple mindfulness practices, which are universally applicable, and really they don't require any kind of involvement in a religious tradition. So, the mindfulness for everyone that we teach on Saturdays is not within any religious tradition. Sunday mornings is not within a religious tradition. We're not asking people to change religions or telling people to do whatever. Anybody can come, anybody can participate. But if one gets deeper and deeper into practice here, we ultimately do teach forms of Tibetan Buddhism, very, very specific traditional forms of Tibetan Buddhism. And we pride ourselves on being able to convey, because we both speak Tibetan and have studied with Tibetans, to convey that tradition in a kind of pure way, but in a way that also takes account of who we are as Westerners.
Interesting. Is there anything just Buddhism, or is there always a form? Like Christianity, for example, there's different types. There's Catholicism,
There's always a kind of culturally instantiated aspect of Buddhism. Part of what's happened in modern history is that in the West we've created something called mindfulness-based stress reduction. And it's kind of as if somebody has filleted a fish and taken out the skeleton. Mindfulness-based stress reduction would be kind of the bones of the fish that you took out of a fish, and you could say this is still a fish, or you could say this is not a fish. It doesn't matter, but this is useful. If you were to eat bones because of calcium, you would get some benefit. Mindfulness-based stress reduction is a kind of essentialized practice of mindfulness that's been completely stripped of every aspect of cultural information. But it doesn't claim to be Buddhism. But otherwise, yes, you've got Sinhalese Buddhism and Burmese Buddhism and Thai Buddhism and Chinese and Tibetan, Korean, Japanese, and they have many similarities and many differences. The spiritual texts that they receive split north-south, so the countries of Ceylon, Burma, Thailand, Vietnam, some parts of Malaysia and Singapore and so forth, they follow what's called the Theravada tradition. The texts they accept are certain ones, and then the canon in Tibetan Buddhism is yet again different, and then the canon of sacred texts is yet again different in China and Japan. So it's what texts are accepted as the word of the Buddha differs, and then the practices differ. But there are many, many teachings that are quite common and universally accepted. And we, for the most part, teach a lot of that. And it's only later, if people really get involved in Tibetan practice, that there are some things that would be very, very different from other schools of Buddhism. But if, like the Tuesday night classes are pretty much, whether it would be Tibetan, Chinese, Japanese, or Korean, most the Mahayana schools of Buddhism would follow what we would take it as useful. Yeah, another question, somebody.
Okay, I'll make up a question. Just in becoming a little familiar with Dawn Mountain and the teachings here over the last few months, I noticed that the meditation position is sitting or on a cushion, kind of upright. And I was listening to another tape that I think is in the same tradition by Reggie Ray, and he talks about meditating in the prone position with your knees up. And I wondered if you might just comment on those two positions or those three positions of meditating.
Yeah, he's doing something a little bit idiosyncratic. There may be some very specific benefits that he's looking for, and so he's teaching something that's a little bit not normative, but it might have some usefulness. And he's a very, very good teacher, but it's not most typical. That's atypical. But of course, he's teaching it. It can be useful, so that's okay. Yes.
Hi, Harvey.
Hi.
My question is, I've been meditating for the last month, the way that you were teaching us like 2 weeks ago.
Yes.
With making Atari substance
Yes.
and taking on the pain, not taking on pain and suffering, but taking that pain and suffering into Atari substance, and that it dissolves. I actually haven't been making Atari substance. I've been actually taking on the pain and suffering, and I love it. It actually makes me feel good. And I notice when I do that, I immediately start crying and smiling while I'm meditating. And I actually, after taking on the pain and suffering, and I'm thinking about people, just family, friends, or people that I know that is suffering, I give them back love as I'm meditating. But I notice in my everyday life, it made me more compassionate to people and more loving to people. Is that a correct way of doing it? Can I?
So what I taught is one variant. As you're beginning to, even in this one evening, there are a lot of variants on all the different forms of meditation. What you're doing is actually one very traditional way of doing the meditation. Totally, totally traditional. And in fact, it's a little bit, if you were to look at, let's say, this book, and this is just a compilation of all these ways of doing that particular meditation. Maybe all of them would show it that way. The way that I'm teaching it is based on an oral commentary, and I also modify it a little bit to make it a little bit so that it's not the curried ocean cucumber. But the way you're doing it, you may have some very deep, like Buddhist or Tibetan Buddhist impressions in your life and lifespans. You're doing it exactly as the commentaries traditionally teach it. And your experience is very fruitional in terms of a capacity to do it in a very rich manner. So you can, unless you run into difficulty, keep doing it exactly as you're doing it.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Anybody else? So why don't we will do a very brief, I'll show you what short meditation is like. And actually when you're starting, it's really good, especially if you notice that you're getting tired. If you start finding, if you meditate a long time and you're not used to it, or even if you are used to it, you can start experiencing forms of tiredness that you are just like sleep. You want sleep more than money, food, or sex. It's like amazing how appealing sleep can become. So if that's the case, you're meditating too long. So you want your session to be short, and short enough so that your clarity is there and it's just nice and crisp. And that might be 3 to 5 minutes. You can set a bell, take a 10-minute break, and then start again for another 3 to 5 minutes. So it doesn't mean just because you do 3 to 5 minutes, you're just doing a 3 to 5 minute total. It's like do 3 to 5 minutes, take a 10-second break, and start again for 3 to 5 minutes. It's very, very useful to do short sessions until you find that you can maintain clarity for longer sessions. So we'll do a short session, and then at the end, I'm going to ask JC to come up and light a candle. And we will, for those of you who have this page, we're going to sing what's called the blessing, which is basically a wish for everybody's welfare. And then we'll read the names and we'll conclude with chanting an ah. But right now we'll just sort of sit for about 2 or 3 minutes. And just the forceful part here is just placing your attention on your breath, wherever it seems most obvious, and then resting in your breathing. You can have your eyes slightly open. And the important thing is to rest in the sensation of the breath and really be almost totally unified with the breath, the experience of the breath. the sensation of the breathing, and just resting into that. Along with the introductions to mindfulness that Claire will be doing on Saturdays, we will have a retreat for beginning meditation from Friday, September 26th through Sunday the 28th. On Friday the 26th, there will be 6:30 to 9. On Saturday from 11 to 1, from 10 to 1, and on Sunday from 10 to 12. So if you're interested in learning, beginning mindfulness, beginning meditation, it would be a wonderful opportunity to get a little bit more of a intensive introduction to that, as well as Claire's courses on the Saturdays. So JC, if you could come up and get a lighter, and there'll be a candle that we're lighting. So in the text, the next to the last line, we do till we all rise forth born in. So we'll sing this with all of you. With all of you in mind, we light this lamp of clarity. May the glow of love, wisdom shine within us, everyone, till we all rise forth born in one enlightened mandala. And tonight, while we hold all beings everywhere in our minds and dedicate the virtue that we've accumulated here in our meeting, we specifically call to mind John Collins, Elaine Bartlett, Gina Ben, Thomas Beverly, Linda Thurman and the Bardo and family, Monica's dog and the Bardo, James Glass, Bardo and family, Ray Williamson, Julia, Kathy Prince, Porter, Annie, Annie's daughter, Nick Edelman, Ruby Wong, Stan and Shirley Geiser, Bobby, Ricky Pickle, all ill children, Rachel and Bardo, Jan, Mary Lou, Dan, Michael, Jean, Jim, Kelsey, Jack, Audrey Lackings, Tom Lucan, Logan Dudgeon, Dawn, Jennifer, Victor, Cheng Ling, Chang Ching, Daryl, Susan, Tuyet, Guillermo, Thomas, Andrea, Rosalie, Betty, Forrest, Naum, Isabel, Emma, Terry, Patricia, Shana, Alexander, Sarah, Stewart, Matthew, Eleanor Day, Ann Page, Jenny Chisnell, John Grossman, Julie Pereglio, Manin Joshi, Adam Hawkinsmith, Mary Anderson, Mary Amundsen Hammond, Greg Hall, Amy Young, Louis, Sammy, Dog, Larry, Calvin, Wheat, Jerry and Patsy Shaw, Arun Shaw and wife, Mary, Casey, Juana, Menga, Ruth, Hans, Barbara, Anne Marie, Verena, Mimi and the Bardo Mimi's family, Jeremy, Jeremy's family, Natalie, all Syrians, Martha, Tony, Betty, Madeline, James Glass, Dan Perdue, Diana Cutler, Joshua Cutler, Valerie Stevens, and Steve Tainer. And we conclude with an just sending our well-wishing out to all sentient beings. Thank you all so much for coming. We appreciate your being here and creating this event. It is created by all of us together. It's no one individual that creates it. Thank you for being here and helping us have the atmosphere.